What's going on, guys? This is Empty Box, and today we're going to be talking about shifting, because this seems to be a problem point for a lot of drivers who don't necessarily understand what's going on, or they're doing it in a way that you shouldn't be doing it. Because I'll just go ahead and say this right now up front: a lot of these sims allow you to get away with things that you would not get away with for very long in a real car, such as iRacing have some terribly stupid transmission bugs, clutch temperature being basically non-existent in any sim except for Live for Speed, and a whole bunch of other things, such as it's basically impossible to actually lose a gear, which is something that is very possible if you abuse a transmission over a long period of time. So, with that said, a lot of these things are things that you don't necessarily have to do when it comes to sim racing, but things that, well, if you're interested in sim racing, you're probably interested in doing things somewhat right, or at least right enough that you would survive a decent distant race. So learn how to do it right. And plus, there are a couple of things that are just really annoying to hear, and it pisses me off when people do them in videos, and it should piss you off too, because it's just annoying. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about a bunch of different things. Just all about shifting today. First of all, let's go ahead and start with the most complex type of shifting that you're going to actually need to understand when it comes to sim racing. Yes, there's double declutching out there. There's non-synchronized gearboxes, but that really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things for sim racing, because that's a very small field of applications that really aren't very popular to simulate. Not really anything that you need to worry about too terribly much, because 95% of the cars that you will drive in a sim do not require either one of those techniques. So let's talk about H-pattern gearboxes with no assists, no aids, nothing like that. It's all up to the driver. The oldest, most purest form out there that you need for sim racing. Now, when it comes to upshifting with an H-pattern gearbox without any assists or anything like that, it's really pretty simple, and I think a lot of us can already do this. You simply let go of the gas pedal, push the clutch pedal in, select your gear, release the clutch pedal, get back on the gas. Really simple, easy to do. It's cake. That's not the difficult part. The difficult part, and where pretty much everybody gets hung up on, is downshifting, because downshifting is where the very difficult part is, and this is definitely very difficult. This takes a lot of practice. This is perhaps as difficult as getting the car simply to go around the track and not be out of control all the time. It's really freaking hard. There are a lot of different ways to do this. There's no, you have to do it this way or else routine or anything like that. If you want proof of this, go ahead and look at some of the Australian V8 supercar pedal cams that are available here on YouTube, and you'll see a bunch of different footwork techniques going on. A bunch of different ways to do the same exact thing. You really have to figure out what works best for you and make it your own, because they're all subtly different. And that's why watching pedal cams is awesome. Now, before we get into how to do this, let's go ahead and relate this to something that you might be familiar with. A bicycle. Now, it might seem strange, but a bicycle, like a car, has an engine. On a bicycle, it's a person. It has a transmission, and it has a drive wheel. They really are fairly similar, and you will have noticed this. You are already familiar with the concept of rev matching. You will have noticed by now, if you've ever ridden a bicycle, that when you go to a lower gear, you need to pedal much faster to do the same speed as what you would do in a higher gear. All you are doing when you are rev matching, which is what you are doing with heel and toe downshifting, is making sure that the engine is already doing the speed that it needs to do in the next lower gear. So basically, it's like starting pedaling really fast when you're downshifting. Really pretty much that simple. In fact, you'll notice that when you are riding a bicycle, that when you start pedaling, it's really slack. It doesn't require a lot of effort until you actually start accelerating, because it's already spinning at that speed. You're not actually adding energy to it. It's sort of like if you were just holding a very light throttle position. The engine RPMs are going to slowly come down because you're not adding enough power to the system. Make sense? I hope it does. So now that we understand what the goal of heel and toe downshifting is, let's go ahead and start applying that and how you actually go about doing that. Now, unlike a bicycle, you have a clutch in a car. This is required because obviously a car has a heck of a lot more power than a bicycle does, as well as the fact that really most cars need to last, frankly. We'll talk about that a little bit later when we get into more advanced transmission types such as the sequential. However, the clutch pedal is very important when you're driving a manual gearbox, because really without the clutch pedal you need to be really accurate with your shifting. Yes, it is possible to drive a manual transmission without any assist or any electronic wizardry without using the clutch pedal. However, using it will make your life a lot easier. Okay? It really will. The important thing about the clutch, and what makes it so much easier to use than doing it without the clutch, is that it decouples the engine from the driveline. When you push the clutch pedal in, no power is being sent from the engine to the transmission and therefore the tires. This means that you can hit the gas pedal and you won't actually get more power. A lot of drivers think, oh, I'm going to a stop, I need to slow down for this corner. There's no way I should hit the brakes because that's just going to make me take a longer distance to stop. You know, it seems kind of obvious. But because the engine is not actually driving the rear wheels at that point, you are free to bring those RPMs up to what they need to be in the next lower gear. That way when you release the clutch pedal, everything's already matched up. It's seamless, it's perfect, it matches up. The revs have been matched. We are in the next lower gear where speed is decreasing. We have no stability issues or anything like that because we brought everything up to the right RPM. It's matched. We're not adding stress to the driveline. There's no driveline shock or anything like that. Wheel hop is eliminated. Everything is perfect. Oh yeah, you also get a really cool sound with a properly rev matched downshift. Yeah, that's reason enough to use this technique and master it. Okay, here is the process in simple terms as you see demonstrated on screen several times now. I'm on the brakes with my right foot. I push the clutch pedal in with my left foot. As I shift down to the next lower gear, clutch pedal still in, I blip the throttle, give it a little bit of gas with the side of my right foot to get it into the RPMs required in the next lower gear, and then I release the clutch pedal. It's really simple, very easy to explain, very simple in theory, but it is something that is very difficult and will take a lot of practice. A lot of practice. In fact, I still get it wrong a lot, not gonna lie. And that's really all there is to it. Heel and toe downshifting is simply the name used for rev matching. You know, it's not anything all that complicated. It's just very difficult to master, and really the only way that you can master is by practice, and a lot more practice. This is not easy at all. So let's get to something that is easy when it comes to shifting. And that would be the sequential transmission, which by and large is very easy compared to what you have to do with a H-pattern gearbox, because more often than not you can get away with driving these things with 2 feet very easily, and most often you do not need the clutch pedal at all except for getting rolling, as opposed to an H-pattern gearbox, which really, in all likelihood, unless you're very ultra familiar with the car, you're willing to risk potential damage, you're going to be using a clutch pedal, which means you're operating 3 pedals with 2 feet. First of all, I want to explain a little bit why the sequential transmission even exists. First of all, it's faster in most cases. It's really most often simple as press a button, get a gear, as opposed to moving all across different gates in an H-pattern gearbox. It's a lot safer, there's a lot less room for error. As you can imagine, perhaps you're downshifting into 3rd gear and you accidentally get into 1st. Obviously, that is not going to be good for the engine. With a sequential transmission, you can only go down 1 gear at a time, so therefore it's a lot safer. You can't accidentally skip into the wrong gear, a lot less opportunity for damage, as well as the fact that really they will last. You don't see this type of transmission in a street car because they won't last. However, with a sequential transmission, what we're going to be talking about here the more manual style, the more GT racing style, is you are basically slamming it into gear. It's that simple. It sounds really bad, sounds really expensive, but that's what they're built for, that's what they can take, and they will survive. However, they need to be rebuilt a lot more than a standard H-pattern gearbox because of the fact that you are slamming it into gear. And obviously for a street car, that's not something that you really can afford to have. Nobody's going to be spending thousands of dollars to rebuild their transmission every 5,000 miles on the streets. This is not going to happen. In a race car, no problem. Chances are today that if you're looking at a major series, it's using a sequential transmission of some type. Really, the only series that I can think of off the top of my head that still uses an H-pattern gearbox is NASCAR. The top 3 series, as well as pretty much any oval racing will use an H-pattern gearbox. But pretty much anything else, from Formula 1 to GT3 to V8 supercars to DTM, are using sequential transmissions of one form or another. There are different forms, and that's why we're going to talk about this a little bit here, because this again is another tripping point. While fundamentally all sequential transmissions are simply shifting one gear at a time, that is what makes them sequential. You have to go in order sequentially, hence the name. There is a wide variety in how they work as well as in the electronic assists. Now, when we're talking about sim racing, we don't need to worry about how it works because we're not engineers, we're not building the cars. It doesn't really matter how incredibly awesome a Formula 1 transmission is compared to, a standard sequential transmission that you'd see in, for example, a GT2 car. That difference is completely irrelevant to us. It does not matter. They are both sequentials, however, they are operated in 2 different fashions, but that is irrelevant because there's really no difference between a transmission that is pedal operated versus a transmission that is lever operated. That is not the defining difference. However, the defining differences between a lot of these transmissions when it comes to sim racing is the electronic assists that they use. Now, the simplest form of a sequential transmission would be one without any assists at all. And this will require you to lift when you go for an upshift, and it will also require you to blip when you downshift. Just like the H-pattern gearbox. However, you don't need to use the clutch on these because the clutch is really completely optional. You are slamming it into gear, same thing as when you're upshifting. It's that simple. If you would like, you can right foot brake and heel and toe downshift and all that stuff just as if you were driving an H-pattern gearbox. It's completely up to you if you would like, if you find that technique suits you. There are tons of drivers who do that. Again, go look at V8 supercars because they use this type of transmission. It's really entirely up to you. From there, you have a very common assist that is enabled with these transmissions, and that is throttle cut upshifts, flat shift upshifts, whatever you want to call them, which basically allow the driver to keep their foot to the floor as they pull the lever, and the engine's computer automatically cuts the throttle and then it applies the throttle back as soon as the shift is completed. Which basically, how you will know if your car has this in a sim is if you shift, if you pull the lever, press the button, whatever, if you see the engine RPM spike up really quickly every time you shift, your car doesn't have throttle cut upshifts, so go ahead and release the throttle when you shift because you look like a giant douchebag when every time you shift you get 5,000 RPMs extra, and it sounds really annoying. Yeah, I hate that. I hate that a lot. Everybody does, so don't do it. Learn to lift. Now, the other assist that is used in these transmissions is electronic blipping, which is basically blipping the throttle, rev matching for you, achieving what you would normally achieve with an H-pattern gearbox using a heel and toe technique, automatically, electronically, done through the engine's ECU, much faster than you can do, much better than you can do, every single time, absolutely perfect downshifts. It's better than you because it's a computer. You are not a computer, so don't think you can actually do better than electronics because you can't. Okay? You're going to see this in pretty much any top-level race car today. Prototypes, Formula 1, Indy cars, whatever. They're going to be using this type of transmission because it's faster, it's better, it's more faster, it's better, and it's more faster. that really is all there is to sequential transmissions in terms of differences. You might say, you know, a GT2's transmission is a lot different from a Formula 1 transmission, and yes, it is mechanically. However, for actual driving, it's still the same thing, as opposed to a Formula 1 car where you're obviously just pulling a paddle and it does it for you. In a GT2 car, you're pulling a lever, maybe lifting out the throttle, but same thing is happening. It's the same operation, and it's really the same operation as what you get with an H-pattern gearbox. However, you don't really have to worry about a clutch pedal, and more often you will find you have assists to make shifting easier. And that is pretty much all I have for you today. Lift when you shift if need to, blip if you need to, have fun, enjoy shifting because it's some of the most fun that you're going to have racing. So if there's any other questions, I will go ahead and answer them down in the comment section or anything like that. Might do a follow-up video regarding auto clutch, but that should be just about everything that you need to know about shifting. So, all right, bye.